I mean, there certainly are tax benefits to investing through a free port. That's how the UK is starting to evolve itself.
The fact that intellectual property is increasingly important for many businesses, that should probably be up there with that setup, that immigration, the employment law, the terms and conditions.
One of the things that is really key is you don't know what you don't know. And that's the role of the advisor, isn't it? The role of the advisor is to tell people what they don't know so that they can then benefit from the way that those systems are set up.
Very true. We're sort of inside 12 months of a new government. There's stability. The right noises are being made around doing things properly for the longer term.
So you actually need to give people that kind of feeling that actually as a country, we're all heading in the right direction. There is going to be some positive growth there in the future. And then I think you'll see businesses be encouraged by that.
Hello and welcome to the new series of our Business But Better podcast, brought to you by Owen Mitchell. I'm Richard Baigent, and I work with Owen Mitchell as an international trade consultant, and I'll be your host for this series. For those who are joining us for the first time, welcome and thanks for joining us. This podcast brings you stories and advice from industry professionals to help you tackle the big issues affecting businesses today. In this season, we'll be focusing on the impact of FDI, that's foreign direct investment. For the UK, FDI is particularly important right now. It drives much needed economic growth, helping the country maintain its competitive edge in world trade. To kick off this season, we'll be discussing the practicalities of doing business in the UK. What are the challenges relating to investing in the UK? How can your business navigate them? And what help is available entering the UK from overseas? I'm joined by two experts who have helped many companies find answers to these questions. Firstly, I'd like to welcome my Owen Mitchell colleague, Bryan Bletso, a corporate partner and head of our international team, helping businesses from across the globe find opportunities for investing and partnership in the UK. I'd also like to extend a very warm welcome to our guest today, nfarmer, a partner at business advisory and accountancy firm, Menzies. Nick specialises in providing international tax advice for businesses, both in the UK and overseas. He's helped numerous organisations manage risk, expand to new markets, and structure global transactions. Welcome both, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Richard.
Nick, I'm going to turn to you first. If I may, starting on a positive, a recent report produced at Owen Mitchell suggests that UK's inward foreign direct investment rose by 126 billion over the course of 12 months. That's circa 6% increase. Clearly, the UK remains a strong investment proposition. Why do you think that is, and what's attracting overseas investors?
As you said, I've worked in this space for a long time. I think the UK, to some extent, has always been an attractive market. It's a big market in its own right. Geographically, it's well positioned, just outside Europe. It attracts a lot of investment from the US. If you look at any of the global ease of doing business rankings, the UK will always be in the top 10. So it's got a lot of the conditions that people are looking for. There's a lot of talent here. There's good infrastructure here. If you analyse the UK and you looked across what we would call the cage factors, so you're looking at cultural, administrative, geographic and economic, those sort of factors, good ways to look at a market, the UK will score typically very well. So you tend to look at markets in terms of how distant you are from that market. So distance would be something like how administratively complicated it is to trade in that market, or perhaps how economically attached your business would be to doing business in that market. Right. So analysing a market across those factors, I think for somebody who's looking at a market, will give them a good understanding whether their business would do well in that market. And a lot of businesses that we see as well don't necessarily expand into a new market without having already done business there. So typically they would, have traded from overseas into that market. They would have found customers here. They would perhaps put a few people on the ground to test the water, and then they will make the big leap and actually expand into that market. So I think the UK, I mean, as you said, it's a strong market. There's a reason for being here in its own right, but actually it gives you good access to wider geographies as well.
Yeah. Bryan, any thoughts on that? Excellent points there made by Nick.
Yeah, I mean, I'd completely echo what Nick has said. I think the UK still has a cachet internationally. You know, the stability, the steady, nature of our business ways, our government, our democracy, I think counts for a lot. And I think we shouldn't underestimate perhaps two other factors. One is language. You know, I think, being born speaking English is a real blessing in the international world. I think we can't underestimate the importance of the English language. And I suppose, being a lawyer, I have to say the rule of law. We have a very established corporate company law code, which is copied and modelled, in many Commonwealth countries. And I think businesses and individuals feel comfortable in the UK because of that, and obviously many other factors too.
I think that's right. I mean, I think that when you take all sorts of anecdotal evidence in the round, I think you underestimate how well regarded the UK is globally. I mean, the Global Soft Power Index, which comes out each March each year, I think it still has us at number 2 globally. And that's through our influence with things like culture, language, as you say, access to finance, the legal system, the education system, our world-class universities, all those sorts of things that when they're aggregated, still make the UK a really attractive place to come and do business.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because the UK, it's a good few years ago now, certainly went out of its way to make itself attractive to inbound investment.
Yeah.
So I look at it typically from the tax point of view, but it effectively overhauled its tax system to put a lot of the conditions around inbound investment to make it attractive. So, we've got a lot of characteristics going through our corporate tax system, things like dividend exemptions, lack of withholding taxes, profit flows between the UK and overseas being guided by a very strong treaty network. In fact, the widest treaty network of any country.
Yeah.
So those tax conditions, although they may not necessarily be someone's sort of top of the agenda, they will be necessary factors to actually trading internationally successfully.
That's a strong driver for how companies make a decision on where they actually set up their operations.
I think my impression anyway is that people look at an economy and say, I'd like to do business there, but then you'd analyse it, and tax will be one of the key factors. It's often something that comes up very early in the conversation. You're looking at how your economy interacts with another economy.
Yeah.
You always want to think about how money is going to flow between those two parts of your operations. And tax, yes, you want to make sure it's set up in a tax-efficient manner. Yeah. And I think the UK has a lot of characteristics that can help with that. And other economies don't necessarily have that.
Yeah.
Again, so it's a technical issue, but when you unpick why the UK can be successful, that is one of the reasons. We've got a lot of the tax factors in place to help that inbound investment.
So I guess it's a case you could go to a very low tax environment, but you might not have access to the markets that you want to sell into, like say Europe for the UK, and you might not have access to the world-class talent that you need to actually make your business work, as an example.
Yeah, I think, taking your points, taking mine, the things you've said, it's not like there's one factor which is going to, dominate everything. It's just a combination, isn't it?
In the round,
In the round, it can be different, for different businesses. Are you a service business? Are you, trading in goods? So you've got to sort of look at what your business is actually doing. But if you're looking at why the UK attracts a lot of business, then those factors that we've mentioned are clearly ones which, will resonate.
Yeah.
I mean, I just add one thing, Nick, is, the ease with which we can incorporate a company, the fact that we can have a single director, the fact we don't need domestic shareholders, perhaps in a company. If you look at countries like the Middle East, that is not the case.
Right.
So, I think over many years we've sort of set up our system to facilitate the ease for doing business and for setting up a business in the UK. And I just add one more thing. Our sort of corporate acquisition structure is pretty well tested here, and it's again copied in other parts of the world. It's very similar to the US system. Yeah. So I think in terms of acquiring a business in the UK, which we'll touch upon later, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I think particularly American companies are very used to the system here. It's very
deep liquidity,
similar.
Of course, available out of the city. Yeah. Just turning to the legal side, I mean, what sort of parts of law do you think companies need to be bearing in mind coming from overseas into the UK? What elements of law typically are we acting for companies and giving advice around?
I think there are several forms of coming into the UK. There's the setting up a corporate here or a branch in the UK, and there are slight differences. I think there's the soft setup here to test the water, and that probably accounts for the majority of businesses coming into the UK. Of course, it's possible to set up a trading relationship, to set up some form of distributor or supplier type arrangement in the UK. I think the sort of way we are able to advise around those topics, Nick and I have worked together for many years with my legal hat and Nick's sort of accountancy tax hat, is a really good example of how the professional services can really sort of contribute to businesses coming in to the UK. So I mentioned before the ease with which you can set up a corporate in the UK. The advice around how to bring people in the UK, immigration is clearly key, even more so following Brexit for our European sort of partners there. I'd say the other areas we can really assist is things like how to trade in the UK, so terms and conditions. Employment contracts are increasingly important. Our employment laws are still pretty favourable compared to our European partners, less favourable, I suppose, from an employer's point of view than the US. And that's a frequent topic of conversation on the legal side, where you have a US corporate coming into the UK. They expect the UK to mirror the US from an employment law perspective, and it's not the case.
Work, is it?
We see many examples where US corporates particularly are caught out by our employment legislation. So I think, as always in any country, there are local issues to be dealt with. It's crucial that a business coming into the UK does take proper professional advice so that they can really set themselves up for success and miss the many pitfalls.
And that's across, all of the professional partners, getting an early involvement with your team of bankers, lawyers, accountants, so there can be a coordinated approach so that pitfalls can be avoided. Any examples of where this is?
That's the point, isn't it?
Caused
At the end
issues
of the day,
you could give?
It's an ecosystem.
Yeah.
That you need a variety of different expertises if you're landing in a new market. So there'll be the legal, there'll be the tax, there'll be the accounting, there'll be the banking, the insurance. There's a variety of different service providers that you will need, and you'll need to, sort of get those lined up in an efficient manner. So there's definitely been examples I've seen where maybe somebody overlooks that immigration piece. They have everything ready to go. They've incorporated the entity. They've got the employee that they want to bring into the UK. They're talking to customers, and then they realise that they
there's a sound of hitting the buffers at that point.
Absolutely. Or the banking can be a big challenge as well. So you have to do these things in a well sort of ordered sequence. And often, it will typically be the lawyers or the accountants that will be the first port of call. And the way I think Bryan and my firm have set ourselves up is that we understand inbound investment. We have the reach in relation to the contacts that can bring that equation together that people need to work on to make it a successful landing in a new market. And that will be any country that you go into. You need to have people on the ground who can help you navigate the system to make sure that you're successful when you land there. Otherwise, it can be a frustrating experience.
Protecting intellectual property, Richard, is also key. Again, the number of companies that do come into the UK, probably quite naively in that respect, is a little bit surprising, given how important
feeling they're protected
property
in their home marketplace, and make the assumption that would then
absolutely. And I think, given the fact that intellectual property is increasingly important for many businesses, that should probably be up there with that setup, that immigration, the employment law, the terms and conditions, trademark protection and other intellectual property protection is also really key, I'd say.
So we're going to be getting into this in a lot more detail later in this series, but just to introduce our viewers to some of the unique advantages of investing in the UK. What roles do free ports and investment zones play in the UK strategy for foreign direct investment? Have you had any experience of where this might have worked within your business for tax benefits, for example?
I mean, there certainly are tax benefits to investing through a free port. That's how the UK is starting to evolve itself with these free ports, set up around the country. They all have certain different focuses, and there's an efficiency there if somebody is looking to set up in a free port, whether they actually bring the goods into that free port, work on them, and then re-export. They're not having to actually clear through customs. So there will be sort of economies in their own right established in these free ports to attract business. As yet, we haven't really seen that come on stream. So that hasn't been a big focus of conversations that we've been having. It might as the free ports start to gear up.
I think 2021, I think they came in investment zones probably about 18 months later. So I think all the free ports are now up and running, but the investment zones not quite. So there is a momentum that's building, right?
It's like anything. I mean, if you take some of the changes that happen in the tax system, it takes a while for people to get comfortable with them, to understand how it's going to work for their business. So, of course, you get early adopters that can see how it's going to work for their business as clear attractions, and other people will sort of follow as they start to understand how that fits into, their particular business. And I think it's a little bit beholden on the professional services sector to start talking a little bit more about the advantages of using a free port or a investment zone. So I believe it will take time. Clearly, it's something that the UK is keen to promote. There's, around the world, I mean, there's a lot of free ports established. They can be highly successful as a way of sort of facilitating trade. So I think we'll see more of that in the future.
Bryan, Owen Mitchell produces, obviously, on a regular basis, the Foreign Direct Investment Report, which has the UK Attractiveness Index, which shows across a range of measures how the top 50 locations in the UK rank as their attractiveness for investors. Free ports and investment zones have had quite an impact in that report, as I understand things.
That's correct, Richard. In fact, the very recent update to that report we issued shows a real emphasis that where a free port or an investment zone is in a particular territory, that the cities around it or involved in it actually receive a big boost. I mean, it's something Owen Mitchell has embraced, isn't it, Richard? You, with your trade consultant hat on, has absolutely led the Owen Mitchell sort of discussion and understanding of the free ports, and it's something we're seeking to very much engage with the with the government and with their representatives to really make our client base aware of it. And we see an opportunity there, don't we?
I think that's important to mention, because I think, Nick, you touched on it. I mean, it will take time for people to understand what the opportunities are, but at the end of the day, when it all boils down to brass tacks, we're in it. We're trying to bat for Britain, right? And it's incumbent on us to show the world what we have to offer as a country. And we're no different in the professional services industry. So, Nick, I think we need to address some of the challenges investors face now, how the economic conditions such as lower growth globally and the potential for a more protectionist landscape, if I could put it that way, in global trade might influence the UK's attractiveness to foreign investors. Anything you'd like to give us some your view on from an accountancy perspective there?
I tend to focus on the tax side, as you know. And I think the conditions globally do make it challenging for people to expand into a new market. There are, clearly since we've left the EU, there are barriers there that people have to deal with. We're hearing about tariffs perhaps being adopted in the US, which is going to be, an additional cost for doing business. So I think initially when people are trading, they need to be able to sort of understand the likely costs, barriers, how they're going to actually navigate them, and take some upfront advice around this, because sometimes what we find anyway is that people haven't necessarily identified how they might trade into a new market.
Yeah.
And when you actually look at it, sometimes the barriers that you perceive are ones that there's a better solution to dealing with. So, I mean, a good example would be perhaps when we did leave the EU, how people changed their models, that they would still obviously trade into the UK, but they might also trade directly into the EU. Otherwise, they'd have been sort of suffering sort of double tariffs on the import and export of goods. So as the world economy changes, there may be this more protectionist sort of approach that countries adopt. Businesses just need to be a little bit more flexible. They need to look at the changes that are happening. There's not necessarily just one way of trading. As you know, there's new trade agreements that the UK is putting in place. There may be new markets that people should be exploring. You do see successes that change does bring opportunity as well. So people need to look at that and perhaps just reflect, is what they're doing still the right thing for their business, or is there a better way for trading? I believe that international would clearly, for the right businesses, be a very significant part of their growth. But you need to have obviously good management who sort of understand how to trade internationally. They need to be well versed in understanding how opportunities overseas can work for their business, and then getting the right advice in that market to navigate those changes that are clearly happening around us all the time.
I see. So understand the variables, make an informed decision.
Oh, absolutely.
Be strategic about it. Yeah.
I think, you've got to try and stop your ship being blown around in the wind, haven't you? Ultimately, at the end of the day. And therefore, taking some advice, and you can do a lot of desk-based research anyway around understanding what these changes might mean. But I've always felt, whenever we advise people internationally, you have to go local. You have to get that local advice, understand what is actually happening in that market. We get certain feed from what we're seeing overseas, but it's always best to get that local support when you're trading into a new market.
Sure. Bryan, any observations?
Yeah, I mean, just following on from Nick, I think one thing I've noticed in the last 10 years in Owen Mitchell's client base is that probably the focus on the rest of the world. Brexit clearly was a big event that happened for business and for individuals in the UK. But I think the central government mantra has been, the world is our trading partner. Yeah. And, I've certainly seen a shift there. As you know, Richard, we're involved in an organisation to do with the Commonwealth, the Commonwealth Enterprise and Investment Council, which is to encourage trade between the 56 Commonwealth countries. And, I think those sort of organisations have increased in importance following Brexit. And I think that works both ways. I think it opens up doors for UK businesses. And as we started this conversation, the UK is still held in esteem around the world. I think developing countries are hungry for the expertise we have in this country, be that financial, professional, from industry. And I think there is an opportunity there for the UK businesses to look into those countries, but also for those countries to look at the UK and what the UK can offer.
Yeah.
So although the UK, I think, clearly is a high tax jurisdiction, it probably the regulatory element is increasing. The workers' rights bill that will go through in this current Parliament. I do think the advantages of the UK far outweigh the perhaps tightening of those sort of areas.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I think if you take on board, and we're speaking here in January 2025, we had a new government come in the summer last year. There's an industrial strategy that's due to be published in, I believe, March, certainly springtime this year. This government has very much pinned its colours to the mast around growth, and that report will hold how that strategy is going to be put down onto the road, if you like. So what sort of things do you think, guys, just at a high level, do you think you'd like to see in that industrial strategy to make the UK look an attractive proposition, and to bring all the elements of the positivity that we've talked about here this morning, together with the realization that there are navigatable challenges?
If I, again, look at it from a tax point of view, one of the things that people want is certainty. If they see a tax system that's constantly changing and fluctuating, they get spooked.
Yeah.
So when this government came in, they set out their business tax roadmap, which pretty much gives you a very strong idea of what's going to happen over the next 5 years.
Right.
We're not going to see corporation tax rates change, so that's fixed at 25% for this Parliament. That gives people, a lot of clarity around the taxes that they're going to be paying here. If you look into that business tax roadmap, there really isn't that much change or new complexity that's going to be introduced.
Right.
So I think
so there's a stable sort of field of play.
The stableness of a tax system is super important to attract investment. And if you can give that landscape to businesses, that they understand how a system is going to operate, and if they make investments, what tax reliefs they may get from it, or how that's going to be dealt with from an accounting and tax point of view, then businesses know how to forecast. They can work out better around cash flows. And as we know on any business, cash is king. So people need to know what investing in a new market is going to mean from a cash point of view, how that cash is going to flow around the system. If they make money in a new market, how are they going to get it back to the home jurisdiction to further build their business and expand overseas again? So actually that mapping of understanding how your business is going to trade internationally, that forecasting element is a very key element as well.
Yeah, a really good answer. I think that the stability element is something that you underestimate at your peril. Businesses need to understand how they're planning, can put their strategies in place. Bryan, anything to add there at all?
It's quite interesting. We're speaking in January 25, as you said, Richard, and obviously we've had the election in the US where America has been put front and center by Donald Trump in his sort of election victory, but also his early days in the White House. And Rachel Reeves the other day has echoed that sort of wish that we put that belief in Britain back into sort of business, the business world. I do think we are very poor at talking up the UK opportunities as a British society, and I think it is incumbent on us as selling the UK, as you said earlier, Richard, but also on the government to really major on the advantages of the UK. You know, the skilled workforce we have here is the envy of many a country, and I think you compare ourselves to countries like Ireland, where there's a limited workforce compared to the wealth of talent we have.
I think that's changing, isn't it? Because I sensed when this government came in, there was a bit of doom and gloom to start with, and their rhetoric has started to change, and they are putting a much more positive outlook on the UK.
I'd agree.
There's much more push towards growth, and you need that. You need to encourage business. You need to give them the sense that there's a positive future. You can talk yourself into doing nothing, so you actually need to give people that kind of feeling that actually, as a country, we're all heading in the right direction. There is going to be some positive growth there in the future, and then I think you'll see businesses be encouraged by that.
Yeah, I think that's right. And look at the appointment of Poppy Gustafsson as the Minister for Investment. I mean, she comes with a track record of building businesses within the tech space. I mean, it's a really encouraging state of affairs, I think. So I think that the summary would be, we're sort of inside 12 months of a new government. There's stability. The right noises are being made around doing things properly for the longer term on a way that people can understand what their options are with the UK, and that there is that stability, I think, is the word that I would use here. Yeah.
I think, Richard, we've also got that startup culture, and that remains. And I think a lot of our tax incentives around startups still remain, don't they?
Yeah, so you've got sort of incentives around research and development. So, we see a strong culture of companies being innovative in the way that they're developing new products, developing new services. There's quite a lot, when you break it down, there's quite a lot of incentives running through our tax system. 100% capital allowances, now available for people that are investing in plant and machinery for their business. So the tax system is trying to support that international growth, either attracting people into the UK by providing that stable platform to do business here. But as I said right at the beginning, the tax system also interacts with, everybody's got their own tax system, and that's where the tax treaties are vital for international trade. I know people probably overlook a tool like that, but the tax treaties are absolutely essential to avoid double tax, additional cost when you're trading internationally. And the UK has, treaties with over 130 countries globally. And that is underpinning a lot of international trade. So I know I'm an advocate from the tax side, but if you took them away, trade would probably start to grind to a halt because of the additional cost of doing business. So tools like that are fundamental to the ease of which UK companies can trade overseas, and overseas companies can trade into the UK.
And I think coupled with that is the push for trade agreements, isn't it? With
free trade agreements,
free trade agreements. Yeah. And there's been a noticeable push since Brexit, I'd say, for those type of agreements with different countries. Australia being a case in point, and I think this government will continue that trend.
Yeah. And you've also got these memorandums of understanding with various US states now. So there is no free trade agreement with the US. It might come. I'm sure that's going to be very complex in its negotiations. But there are these memorandums of understandings with individual states, although, they're not necessarily legally sort of binding. They are sort of statements of intent of how those states want to do business with the UK. And I think, again, businesses need to sort of understand what is out there for them. If you know something like that is there, you can see how it's actually could benefit your business. So that's the role of the advisor, isn't it? As we were saying, the role of the advisor is to tell people about the free ports, because that might work for their business, is to tell them about these tools such as, the memorandums of understanding with various US states, because again, it could be something that really does work for their business.
And we've seen that in action. So Texas is a territorial head of the US desk.
Before,
Georgie Collins there as well. That sort of memorandum of understanding. And what is quite interesting is cities like Manchester are really trying to take advantage of those type of connections by sending delegations out to Texas to really drive that trade, and that surely is a very positive thing.
I think you said to me before we went on air, one of the things that is really key is you don't know what you don't know, and that's the role of the advisor, isn't it? The role of the advisor is to tell people what they don't know, so that they can then benefit from the way that those systems are set up.
Very true. And I think, just to wrap that up, what the UK has to offer here, and it's been demonstrated here this morning, is a wealth of experience across the professional services sector. Owen Mitchell and Menzies are two such firms that are full service law and accountancy firms offering that support and expertise to companies looking to the UK. Okay. Well, fantastic answers there from both of you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. This has been a great first episode. Thank you so much to you, Bryan, and thank you, Nick, again for your contributions today. Next episode, we'll be looking at free ports, what they are, how they work, and what are the benefits on offer for overseas investors. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on our experts' advice. I hope you can join us for the next episode, but bye for now. Thank you.